So guys, as you know, I got the S5 recently. I've been testing it out for a couple months now. And one question I've seen online quite a bit, and a question I had for myself was, should you or should you not get this kit lens, the 20-60, when you buy the S5? It's going to be another one of those casual kind of videos, not really scripted. We're just going to go over why you might want to and why you might not want to buy the 20-60 with your S5 as a kit. So obviously it's a pretty good value. It's only a couple hundred extra bucks to buy this lens with your camera, and it's gonna be, you know, a little bit more expensive, probably more expensive than I would want to pay for it if you buy it after the fact. So this thing certainly does have a few things going for it. I mean, usually kit lenses just bore me to tears. I just am like, oh wow, Canon's 24-105 f4 to 7.1, cool. But I don't know, this thing has a really cool range. As someone who really doesn't like the moderate wide angles, I'm talking about your 28 millimeters, your 24 millimeters even. That's the reason I like the Leica 10-25 so much, is I personally find that 20 millimeter wide angle infinitely more useful and practical than 24 millimeters. I don't even think 24 millimeters is really wide angle anymore. And with things trending towards wide angle with smartphones and everything like that, wide angles really are attractive to me. And so this being a 20 millimeter on the wide end, f3.5 is not that fast, but on full frame, you can do quite a bit of damage with that. So pretty nice. So when you zoom in, of course, you get all the way out to 60, which might not be as far as other kit lenses. And it does darken into f5.6, which is pretty typical. But I think that's a fair price to pay for that 20 millimeter wide angle, especially because there's not a ton of wide angle options for the system overall. So could be interesting. So let's get into it. Who should buy this lens? Who shouldn't buy this lens? Well, I think the obvious one of someone who should consider this lens very seriously would be vloggers, people that do travel, things like that. This is pretty small for a full frame lens, and it's pretty well built. Honestly, it's, splash and dust proof, I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure if it's freeze proof, but it's actually really nice. It's one of the better kit lenses I've ever done. It's got a really great, we'll do a little mini build quality section. It's got a great zoom that is really smooth, and you can get some smooth shots. It's got a cool focus ring, which can actually be linearly programmed to do whatever degrees you want in the S5 and other things. It's got a little AF MF switch on it, and yeah, that weather sealing and the compact size, the wide angle, I think it's going to be pretty good for just general travel filmmaking and photography as well. As far as general photography goes, it's hard to say. I don't think it's a great portrait lens, although f5.6 on full frame, you can get away with it. Just a little bit further than that standard 50 millimeters going all the way to 60, you can get a decent amount of separation. But I really think for travel filmmakers and now for photographers we're talking about, I think that range is going to be what's attractive, and especially on the wide end. So you can do landscapes, environmental portraits, and the other thing about the 20 millimeter end is it's a pretty good close-up lens in that regard as well, and you get really pretty darn close to your subject. I think it says on the lens here, how close can we go? It does not say on the lens, but it does say on the screen here. Look at that, movie magic, wow. Anyway, so yeah, pretty good at macro on the wide end, pretty bad close-up on the long end, but it is what it is. I wish it was a little closer. But for really high-end photographers, I think this is going to be a nice, fun lens. But for critical work, I think there is a little bit of distortion at the wide end that's mostly corrected. There's definitely some aberrations, it's not the sharpest lens ever. And for the landscape photographers out there, I think the flare can be a little crazy. I do feel like it washes out the contrast a little more than usual. I do feel like the flare elements are a little bit more pronounced than usual. Sun stars, who knows if they're any good, you let me know, but that could be helpful. So yeah, for someone who wants a light kit and wants to, get a wide angle in their kit that's not super expensive. It's not super big. And it's got decent enough performance with a random good macro ability at 20 millimeters. I just do not know if photographers are really going to love this lens, but I can see this being sort of like a, I don't love it, but it is useful type of lens. You know what I mean? Although I will say, we're back editing again here. I will say that, yeah, it's not great. I kind of just assumed that the S series was going to have some good macro options, or at least lenses that are good at close-up images, and I think the 24 to 105 is really good. But I've got the 24 to 70, and I took that to a restaurant looking to do some food stuff, and it just was not good enough. I had to zoom all the way into 70, and that wasn't always the perspective I wanted, so yeah, it definitely is super useful for certain things like products and things like that. So what about content creators? You know, how is somebody making YouTube videos, self-filming, you know, all that kind of stuff? How is this lens going to perform for them? Well, again, I think that wide angle 20 millimeters and that f3.5 is going to be pretty decent for that type of work. I mean, I usually like it 10 to 25 for self-filming all the time with a GH5. And honestly, given the crop factor, it's got like the exact same specs at the wide angle. It's a 20 millimeter f3.4, 3.5 on full frame. And guess what? Exact same, except it's a kit lens. And so theoretically, let's do a test. They should, in terms of background blur, in terms of field of view, should be very similar. And so whether or not that's exactly true, you know, these focal lengths and apertures are a little bit fudged, but it should be pretty similar. And I find for someone who lives in a fairly small apartment who is filming themselves a lot, I really like 20 millimeters for filming myself. It's not too wide, it's not too zoomed in, and having a f3.4, f3.5 aperture, f2.8 is a little better, of course, but I don't know. It's just about good enough, and honestly probably a little bit better than the Leica 10 to 25 because the S5's autofocus is improved just that much. So, you know, I talked about vloggers and stuff like that before, but if you're, we're going to touch on it again here, if you're a vlogger or a content creator, you're doing filming yourself all the time like this lens, I don't know, I think this is a pretty great option. Oh, it does come with this lens hood too. I don't know if anybody cares, but here it is. It looks, you know, it does make it look a little more professional, I suppose, so. Thumbnail posing time. Up next, we're talking about this lens for serious filmmakers. So, could you use this for weddings, for videography, for short films? Well, first I'm going to say short films, not really going to be my first choice. You know, the fly-by-wire is linear, but it's still fly-by-wire. The zoom is smooth, but it does have a little bit more flickering when you zoom it quickly at all than your normal lens. It does telescope, which is what it is. But the big thing for me for film and video is going to be that variable aperture. So something like the Leica 12-60 for the GH5 is a lens that I really like, even though it has a variable aperture, because you could just stop it down to f4, treat it like a 24 to 105 that just happens to go to 120, call it a day. For this, even though it's full frame and, you know, you're going to get a little bit more separation, I don't know, I just feel like shutting this lens down to f5.6 for the whole range is just, I don't know, it just doesn't seem right, and it's something I really don't like doing. And even though the S5 is really great in low light, stopping this down to f5.6 for filmmaking just so you can zoom around, it just doesn't sit right with me. That being said, my main lens on the S5 is that 24 to 70, and sometimes it just isn't wide enough. I've run into the situation a few times where I'm just like, oh, I just can't get back wide enough, and I'm always happy to have this lens around, so it's tough. You know, do I love this lens? No. Will I take this on vacation with me every single time while I'm traveling? Yes. Will I take photos with this and do content creation stuff with this? Yes. But for filmmakers, do these birds. But for filmmakers, I really just don't know if this is going to be their best option or if you're going to love this lens. But it just might be the only option you've got. I mean, what else for the system goes to 20 millimeters, you know? There's not even a 24 millimeter prime, and the 24-70 doesn't have great close-ups. So this is not only my widest L-mount lens, but it's also the lens that can focus the closest. So for those two reasons, it's not great, and if you're a videographer, you can probably get away with not picking it up. But if you already have it, I think you're going to have a hard time letting go of it. So yeah, if you use wide angles a lot, but not like ultra wide angles, if you shoot close-up images, if you're a travel photographer or videographer or filmmaker, and if you're a content creator, this might be an essential lens. But yeah, I don't know. I think it is right for most people. That's the conclusion I'm coming to, having talked through some of these points with you guys. It is a nice lens. It does perform well enough. It is built really well. It's like probably the nicest, you know, besides the plastic, it's probably the nicest kit lens I've ever had for a camera. Not that I've had a ton, but I just think it's not my favorite lens, but it's going to be hard to justify not getting it for the price that it adds to the S5, which is only about, you know, $300 or something. And it's going to be hard to get rid of if you did buy it. So yeah, I think a lot of people are going to want to buy this lens. I think a lot of people who did buy this lens are going to have a hard time giving it up. So I did a poll, and it seems like most people think, yeah, get this lens. I think maybe 80% of people were like, yeah, it's worth getting for sure. And a comment on that really summarized it best to me, which is, you know, this isn't really, don't really consider this a zoom lens. Consider this a 20 millimeter f3.5 pseudo macro lens that can just happen to zoom out to 60 or zoom in to 60. But you get what I'm saying. And that's a really good way to put it. It's a good lens. Consider buying it. Hope this video helped you out. If it did, hit the like button, subscribe, and if you want to see more S5 content, I might put this up. There's a lens I want to put this up against. So if you want to see that, definitely subscribe to check out when that video comes out, as well as all kinds of other Panasonic Lumix GH5 S5 content. So you guys know what to do, so go ahead and do it, and I will see you in the next video.